Speak loud. Well, that's new and interesting. We weren't talking about collaborations. Are you getting the little recording dialogue? It's recording now.
It came up and then went away.
Let me see what it does again.
It says stop recording.
Yeah, it says it's recording.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a dot on the screen down there. I think that orange dot tells you that it's recording.
I don't know where you're looking.
Yes.
I don't think, no, that's the computer. That's
Okay.
not Zoom. But thanks. All right, so we're going to ask the official question. How is it working with Emily? And how is it having Emily work you? Who'd like to start? Really? We're just not all fully present yet? All or awful?
I would say it's I would say it's very good and very clear, very easy to follow, for sure.
Very glad that's true. Good. And is it making any kind of a difference as you do the ponderings and the practices?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has.
Yeah, because those are some pretty powerful ponderings, aren't they? Most of us don't get to spend time exploring those. Others, specific issues, questions that came up, or breakthroughs or breakdowns?
I like to, I actually am writing everything out, like to ponder and to practice. It's just kind of, for me, writing is just so visceral. And so I feel like when I'm doing that, I'm kind of making even more of a commitment to the, to what's being asked of me, and almost putting out a prayer into the world about it. So, so that's helping me tremendously a lot. And the whole, I mean, I kind of skipped ahead. I think Karen had done that too. I can't stop reading it, but the whole notion of faith is, I love the way it's explained. And Dr. Joseph Murphy, I think I had read before this, just that faith it's like a technology, not this blind thing that, praying to idols or whatever. The Roman Catholicism that I was fed as a child. That faith is something that I can actually work with, like science. I love that. So that's really juicy for me.
Good. Yeah, it was a huge breakthrough for me to get that. Yeah, that it wasn't just what I had been taught to say I believe in, but it was something, far beyond that. And, when Charles Fillmore was identifying what he was calling the 12 powers, faith is one of those powers. And Emma has suggested that power is a quality of the divine. So faith with a capital F is one of the qualities of the divine. That adds to the depersonification.
I like to think of faith as a muscle. It only gets stronger when you use it.
That's nice. And I do encourage people to start small. Start with what you can actually trust that deep inside, and work up from there. But you can also start with a hypothetical, and that's what Richard Bach describes in the book Illusions. When David says to imagine something and invite it into his life, and he imagines a bluebird coming in, he can accept the possibility that a bluebird will come in, and their order comes and he gets a carton of milk with a bluebird on it.
I love
that. It may not be what we're anticipating, but it'll be.
Exactly. And that's because that aspect of being does not work with verbs. It works with symbolic images, right? Verbs or nouns. It works with symbolic images. So it's the idea of it. And that can be a graphic or a physical object. Mhm.
So I actually have a question then, Ruth. So is it better to, because like you're saying, it is like Linda said, it's a muscle, and I like to call it a snowball effect. Like once you're in that momentum, I'm borrowing from Esther Hicks now with this momentum. But so start with small before you try to, let's say, manifest health, like something, or a change of vibration of health. Is it better to start small, like today I'm going to see a bluebird, instead of making this giant leap to health, let's say, or not?
So if you have been experiencing physical issues, it's hard to know that pure health is your experience now. Right? So you can say, what I would do is I would say, I can feel how this is improving right now. That I could feel an improvement. I could count, I could experience an improvement. That's a starting small. The ones who are manifesting money, I'll say, figure a number that makes sense to you that you could receive, not a number that is your ultimate wish the first few times you start working with this, right? So if money is something that is important at this point, and it never is always important. It's an interesting phrasing. But sometimes there's a need to put one's hand on a few bucks. And to know that one can put one's hand on that number of bucks is a huge part of the process. So whatever it is, knowing that the key works in the door and that you can get into a space, knowing that the community is such that you can count on seeing someone that if you're feeling the need to connect with someone, right? Even if you've had a day all day by yourself, and then you go down into the dark and you see all these good friends. She actually posted that on Facebook a couple days ago. Lovely day all by myself, and then I went down into the village and I got to talk with all these wonderful people.
And they just appeared.
So those things. Does that work?
Yep.
Excellent.
And I was going to share the practice number 4.
Lesson 6.
On which page? 40?
Well, this is an old book, so
It's lesson 6 though, right?
lesson 5.
Oh, lesson 5. Okay, I'm ready.
Actively accept, receive all the good that comes your way every day with gratitude for spirit's active support.
Yep.
And I noticed that by noticing what I'm grateful for and noticing the good,
Yep.
it's like, oh, I'm living in the flow right now.
Woohoo!
And that felt good.
Yeah, that is lovely. Actively accept and receive. It's huge. And this is in the direction of the allowing that Linda had talked about a while back, right? That we can claim it, we can declare it, but if we're continuing to block it, forget it. Right? And sometimes it's an unconscious belief that blocks it, but often it's that'd be nice, but I don't really think it could happen right now. That will block it.
After yesterday.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Shall I share my story?
Sure.
Okay. So, for about a week now, for some time we've known that we needed the young man to no longer be at Linda's place, but she had arranged for him and his stuff and all of her stuff to get fumigated on Monday the 6th. And then as far as I was concerned, we were on a very, very tight clock to get him out after the 6th. And I had done some searches online and I had encouraged him to, and all of that good stuff, but nothing was moving. And I spent a lot of time doing inner work over this weekend. And on Monday evening, we sat down and we're talking with with Claire. Some of you know Claire, and she was sharing a story that paralleled this young man's experience. And I could feel the energy shift. It was like it wasn't hopeless anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So alongside that, I've been asked to explore living in a different situation. And it has become clear that the ceiling of that situation absolutely must be insulated if I'm going to try to live in that situation or even stay there some days every month. And so I've been in my head practicing what it would look like to have to insulate that place and what it might cost and all that. So on Tuesday, yesterday, yes, what's that?
Yeah, it was just
Okay.
yesterday.
All right, so Monday afternoon, I walked into my house and there was a flyer and I picked it up and I made a phone call and someone showed up on Tuesday morning and said, yeah, we can insulate this whole place, the one I'm in now here in Walport, and give you a heat pump, no cost to you. So my insulation dreams for where I am now that have been going on for a year and a half were fulfilled because I was seeing insulation happen, right? And within an hour after he walked out the door, I got 3 phone calls and a text message, all of them telling me that the young man, counselors had found him a place to go to, and he would be out that afternoon. So, you know, being in that flow space, that which we are willing to think is possible and know deep down must be possible and has to happen, happens. So it was lovely to have all of that happen in the last couple of days. And a couple of other things have happened too, but that was a story that I've already shared with a couple of folks. So that's how faith works. You have to eliminate any contradictory idea and be open to the possibility of shifting and changing. That hopefulness, that shift in the energy Monday night is what opened the way for the moving on Tuesday to happen, right? And for me, the being fully conscious of what it takes to get insulation done and knowing that it can happen was what it took for the insulation in the trailer to happen. I was literally on the edge of ordering materials to insulate the bottom of the trailer. And like it was on my desk as one of the next things to do on Monday afternoon when I got that flyer. So yeah, we are truly blessed just in the knowing. And that's the power of faith. Thank you. Other thoughts, other experiences, other questions that have come up in doing the lessons 5 and 6? No? All right, well, let's move on to lesson 7 then. Personality and individuality. For me, this was the first thing that she offered that was really different. This idea of how we can understand ourselves and each other. So I'm going to start scrolling through the text on screen.
Sue Riley has a great song called Divine Order, and she talks about individuality and personality.
Sue Riley is one of the folks who founded the Empower Music and Arts, and she is a songwriter and musician in her own right. And she had studied Emily in a unity environment too. Wow, we're making headway in the book. Look how long I have to scroll to get there. Oh my goodness. So when we're looking at this idea of people, we need to realize that what we have been experiencing with our brain and our perceptions is not necessarily who and what the person actually is. And most of us have been trying to practice that a little bit more lately. And what the opening of this, she's focusing on simplicity. And, Karen, jumped right in with that one, how simple and straightforward this is, right? So, Emerson, she quotes Emerson, converse with a mind that is grandly simple, and all literature looks like word catching, right? And part of what Emerson is going with that, when he says grandly simple, he's saying someone who's speaking from the heart rather than demonstrating his intellectual prowess. Yeah. And then she says most writing about metaphysics is anything but simple. So she wants us to define terms. And she says individuality and personality are two very important terms. Personality, the outer changeable person. Now, changeable is actually a very important idea in metaphysics, period. If you are at all familiar with the Hindu ideas, you've heard of Maya, you've heard of, and Buddhism also, Maya, and it's usually translated as illusion, but it actually means malleable, plastic, changeable. Anything that is changeable is not, capital R, real. It is not true. It is a reflection or a mask, which is where persona comes from, mask over the reality. So Maya, illusion, changeable are all referring to the same thing. So in the second point in that section, she says, when you say you dislike someone, you mean you dislike their personality. You dislike the changeable exterior presentation. And one of the things that helps me with this is the mother who looks at her child, and Mary Morrissey used to do this with her kid. That's not the you that I know. Isn't that nice? When you insist on the behavior that you are seeing has nothing to do with the person you are seeing it, and inviting them to be the person that they truly are. And so that gets us to individuality, the unchanging, the inner, the real, the person. And this is the individualized, the unique spiritual being, okay? It's not necessarily the totality of the one, it's the unique pattern of the whole, aspect, the unique pattern in this aspect of the whole. So individa means undividable. So individuality is undividable. And another way to look at it is individe duality. You can't divide it into duality, right? Individuality. So the more the spirit comes into visibility through someone, the more individualized, that is, the more the individuality is our experience rather than the personality. And I know all of you have, everyone in this group has roles in which you're allowing that individuality to be the experience of the people around you. And I know most of us slip back into the personality when we're not on. And so part of what we're learning to do, and part of what I call being more authentic, is to be more fully the individuality all of the time. And I found that that was part of my healing process. The more I could allow spirit to be what was being expressed and experienced, and the less the facade, the persona, the trained, being, the ego mind was my experience, the more healthy my body has been. I hope that is useful there. And then she says, don't be confused. All right. Being spiritual does not require that you be religious. And we know about that. We're spiritual, not religious. All right. So the next paragraph, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who we've quoted many times, right? Was a man of great individuality, but retiring personality. And that's part of why he was so famous, because he rarely would be up there with any idea of it being about him. It was always about what he called reason with a capital R had to offer through him. He thought of himself as a philosopher and a poet. He was a means by which these ideas could come through to the people in front of him. If you go on to the next paragraph, the John the Baptist, right? Yeah, he could be thought of as representing personality. Judas also could be Judas Iscariot in the disciples could be representing personality, looking at the issues, being concerned about the propriety of things, all of that, right? And whereas Jesus, is the individuality incarnate, really. So then we get, a personality, right, maybe aggressive. And in our culture, we train personalities to be aggressive, although we don't really like women to be aggressive. I mean, if you're assertive, how dare you? But we do train the personality to be out there making things happen. When what we saw in the realm of faith was the personality isn't where it happens, right? It's in the individuality, it's in our deepest knowing that it flows through out there in the world and comes into being. I could have imagined, but it never occurred to me that there was a way for this mobile home that I've been rehabbing to receive free insulation and a heat pump. It would never have occurred to me. And I kept going, are you sure this is a pre-1972 single wide mobile? And they're going, yeah, that's what we're here for. I went, really? So it will be much warmer this winter. So individuality makes it happen. Personality is like where I was going, wait a minute, how could this be true? That's changeable. All right. And she goes on, she says, a pronounced individuality never battles, never puffed up with pride, never governed by likes and dislikes, never causes them in others. And you can think of that when you're in that place yourself, or when you're with someone who is in that pronounced individuality. There is no hackles rising. There are no falling in love withs, really. It's just, oh, wow. Right? There's just that being in it. So she says a pronounced individuality is God is spirit come forth in greater degree, and all mere personality bows before it. So dealing with strong personalities, she set us up for that. Whenever you're afraid of someone or shrink back from them, it's because their personality is stronger than yours and overwhelms yours. So anyone that we are uncomfortable around, it's their personality, the changeable part of them, that we are uncomfortable with. And so our job is to namaste, recognize that spiritual individuality in the person and know that what has made us uncomfortable is changeable, is malleable, and can be dissolved and replaced through negation and affirmation. Okay? And the folks who are caught in personality are often, they feel flattened in the presence of individuality. And if they're, oh, we got someone else coming on, or is Karen coming on Jana's video, Jana's Zoom account? Karen was saying that she was having computer problems before. So that may be what's happening here. All right, so.
I have a
Yes.
question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So how do we deny then like you can't, I've always had this issue about like, this person, like you're saying, I'm afraid of this person, their personality, okay? But what should my denial be? It should be that this personality has no
This is
issue
my work.
on me, right? It can't be that I can want to change them, obviously, right? So like what would be the wording for that?
Right. this personality can't happen in my world.
Ooh, I like that. I got a few of those.
Person's welcome, but the
A
personality.
lot of them are doctors.
I hear you. I hear you. And I've actually seen transformations in people's experiences of other people when they got that, wait a minute, I'm experiencing personality. The personality is being reflective of some previous beliefs I've got. So I'm dissolving the beliefs and that possibility of that personality at the same time. So, for a short time, I had not known my father, and I met a man who was a lot like him, and it was soon after my divorce. So I actually went out with him a few times. And yes, good. You were able to find a way back in, Karen. I'm glad. But, I became very clear that the essence of this guy was terrific. He was a loving, caring guy who really wanted to make a difference in the world. But the specifics of how he did so ran counter to almost everything I thought was appropriate and comfortable with it, right? And so I did, at that time, I was very young in all of this, and I was just actually beginning in the ministry when I met him. And I became clear that I had everything that he actually was, this caring, loving person who wanted to change the world and do good things and all of that was more than welcome. But that personality, that way of doing it, was not in alignment with what I knew to be true, and therefore could not continue to exist in my world. And very comfortably, we both kind of moved on in different directions. We had a friendship of varying degrees over a few years, and I now hear from him about once every 3 years, and he always acts like we just talked last week. Yeah. So, and he's doing more good in the world. I'm very pleased for him. But I hope that's an example that works.
Yeah.
Because, good. All right. So then there's this paragraph that starts, if you're inclined to be timid or shrinking, practice the following. All right. As you walk down the street or see anyone coming toward you, this is really good in malls. Even a stranger, silently repeat, quote, I am a part of God in visibility, of God being visible. I'm a part of God being visible. I am one with the source of all. This person has no power over me, for I am unaffected by all personalities. So that's a generic, I'm unaffected by all personality. And I've lived a lot in inner cities, and I walk around in strange cities more than I ever expected in the last few years. And knowing this, that, no personality out there is going to create any distress or disturbance in my life, because I am the individuality of the divine, really makes a difference. I've actually seen people approaching me in one way and then turning around and being a very different way when they get to me. So
I don't use that terminology, and I'm wondering if I'm doing this, but using different words. Am I thinking, or am
Probably.
I on the wrong track? But when I feel those vibrations that are off with another person,
okay.
I usually say, okay, if that's what I'm seeing, that's illusion, because that the reality of that person is they are whole, perfect, and complete.
Excellent. Right. My eyes are seeing an illusion,
Illusion.
and my knowing knows their perfection.
And that helps me bypass or overlook the personality.
Right. Bypass, literally, or look through it.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, ideally. Right. And the as with the mother and son I referred to earlier, sometimes the personality has been affected by the movie they just saw or the people they were just with or whatever. And so that's where we go, wait a minute, that's not how I know this person to be. Right? I know this person to be this loving, kind, caring person, not this way this behavior is showing up.
Unfortunately, there's a couple that I've never seen the other side.
Yeah, well, that's your inner knowing got to carry you. I understand. There is after the italic quote, it says, make it a habit to repeat words like these whenever you approach someone. You'll soon find that no personality, no matter how strong or aggressive, can throw you off balance. Right? And you can actually imagine that in your feelings. A way of affirming is to imagine something coming out differently. You can go back into a past experience and imagine it come out differently. You can imagine someone that you have met and you might be meeting again, and you can have it come out differently because you know that their persona, their mask is changeable. It is illusion. It isn't the reality of them. And you get to experience the reality of them.
Is there a diploma?
Maybe every. That's good. That's good.
Right. She asked if there was a diploma there. Yes, Rosemary.
So I like this notion when you said go back in an experience that you wish, let's say, had gone differently. So would you use just the same phraseology about that? This was,
If
you know,
it works, you can use what she said. You can use what Emily says. You can use anything that works for you to know, wait a minute, what I'm experiencing is not the reality of this person. I henceforth experience only the reality of this person. It's kind of like, when someone got up on the wrong side of the bed, that's not who they are, So you know that whatever grumpiness or whatever bossiness or whatever bullying or whatever anything seems to be other than divine is not the reality.
I'm finding that the first people that are in the personality are changing their wanting to be with me.
Right. And so did you all hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that's true. And that's, as I said, that one guy and I, ended up moving in different directions because the alignment with what I knew to be true wasn't happening. The insistence that it was going to be that way was, so the connecting, we're doing good in the world, we're making a difference in the world remains, but the interaction is virtually non-existent. Yeah. Yeah. And, I've been working with Karen, whom you've all met, the other Karen. And one of the things that we've been able to do is most of her interactions with people in the healthcare system they are loving her. And she is receiving their love. And it's only when she loses the bubble, that's what we said in the Navy, the old navigation thing was this great big thing of water with an air bubble in it. And you needed to have the bubble pointing in the right place in order for the ship to go someplace. So if you couldn't find the bubble on this big thing, you were in trouble, all right? So losing the bubble means you're not navigating in the direction you've chosen and you really don't know where you are and you are lost, right? Effectively, you're lost. And so when we lose that sense of this is what's happening, then that old stuff can come up, but it's not going to come up as intensely as it used to. And that's the really important thing to remember. So there were some folks who, as she had this turning, and I don't know exactly what caused it, but it did. And there were a couple of days there where people were not being, how she experienced being loving, right? They were doing what they thought they needed for themselves rather than what she needed for her, right? And so it was a beautiful example, and she could see it, afterwards, that that was what was happening. So she's moving back into this other way of being, and she's not in an environment where they are anymore. She will never encounter those people again. So that's the other piece, that often they show up, and as we shift, we're literally in a very different environment, physical environment.
I did a little bit of this working through my relationship with my mother, and I did your release and replace process. But in doing that, I was seeing all these years that I blamed all my issues on my mother.
As we all do. We go through a
Um,
stage of that, yes.
Is what I was reacting to was her personality.
Right.
And when I backed off and saw her as someone who literally, I think every day of her life was afraid.
Yep.
Afraid of what everyone else thought about her.
Yep.
Afraid that I didn't love her, that my dad didn't love her.
And you weren't gonna turn out to be a good person.
Right. And that's why we were like oil and water.
Mhm.
And it was through that process of seeing her vulnerability.
Yep.
Because she always came across like intense, dominating, controlling, all of that. And yet here was this person that was just shaking in her boots half the time.
Yep.
Or most of the time.
Right.
And once I could see that side of her, that part of her, I was able to say, my God, you did the best you knew how to do with what you were working with.
Mhm, mhm.
And I was able to forgive and move on
Right.
and stuff. But that was,
Compassion is the first
Yeah.
step. Right. Absolutely. And at some point, you realize that your individuality and her individuality were loving each other fully all through that.
Mhm.
And that there were probably contracts before you were born that said, oh, I think I need to learn how to do this. I'll be glad to do that for you. Yeah. And, I think all of us have worked through stuff with our mothers because that's the nature of our culture. And the compassion is the first step, absolutely. And ultimately realizing it is God loving God through these two aspects of being with unique patterns within the godness. That frees us up from so much. Indeed. So
Blessed with 4 brothers.
you've been blessed with 4 mothers, one for each chamber of the heart. I just thought of that.
Yes.
All right, so then she comes up with ways to deal with strong personalities as she moves on through this text. And then developing one or the other. So and we don't need to do anything more about dealing with strong personalities, but we can develop one or the other in ourselves, okay? So we develop our individuality by listening to the still small voice. Funny thing about that, listening to that voice of spirit that's within us and boldly following it. Boldly following that still small voice, that inner guidance, right? Have you found it?
Yeah. Oh,
Good. So we do often have to overcome a lot of fear to follow the small voice because it is often contrary to what the culture has trained us. But the culture has been training our personality and totally disregarding our individuality.
is there anything in our culture that would help develop the individuality?
Yeah, it's processes to get out of the culture. So you can join a monastery. There are things in the culture that help you step aside so you are in the world but not of it. And those processes, and they are built into the culture, the processes to get there. But they do cause you to drop out of the rest of the culture. So for what that's worth. And if you think about, for example, the horror stories that some people have shared about monasteries or convents or whatever, it's a difference between being in personality or being in individuality. If I look at, for example, I woke up the other morning and I found myself singing every single song in The Sound of Music, and I was playing the whole movie in my head. Really? But the Mother Superior in Sound of Music is in her individuality. She doesn't bring her personality into the mix. The novitiate director is in her personality. Right? And so Maria is able to connect with the Mother Superior and realize what the difference is to some extent. So she is moving on in her life, learning to move into individuality. So it is possible to be in one of these things that are part of the culture that ideally would help us be experiencing more individuality. But there is another way, and believe it or not, it's the military. The military rewards those who are able to operate without ego. And they get the best results, and so they get the best bennies and the best promotions and all of that. So to the extent that someone working in the military can see that what their personality is demanding is not appropriate in this situation, they will probably succeed. So my mother worked for the Defense Department most of my life, and most of the colonels and admirals that I met were pretty much devoid of this kind of personality that Emily is talking about. They were living from their individuality. And the book that got published last spring that I was working on is a book on how to do that. And we called it Stage 4 Leadership, sourcing leadership, leadership from the inside, from that deeper wisdom that is from listening to the still small voice. So yes, there are ways. All right, so the last paragraph there, as we move through our world, encountering others, we can develop our own individuality by focusing on the Christ Spirit dwelling in every human being we meet. And so this is Mother Teresa. I think that's what the footnote there is, right? That everybody, yep. No, it isn't. It's namaste. All right. But Mother Teresa would train her novices to see everybody as Christ's body and to love everyone as they love Jesus Christ. And remember that a nun is technically married to the Spirit of Jesus Christ. So they are literally serving their lovers. Yeah. So we see through the mask of their personality to the love, intelligence, power, and wisdom that is in each and every one. And a huge part of that book that I helped to write is methods in the workplace for getting to there. And hopefully the ebook version can get finished this winter. I thought it would get finished this summer, but my co-author got too busy to do his part. So it's sitting there.
Sunday, I was told by Eileen Lighthawk. I'm kind of blanking out. The divine is the love of my life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Rumi would agree.
Ishkala Mabud Leila.
You got it.
God is love, lover, and beloved.
Right on. Yes.
And if we really want to get sassy, we would say God is our first love.
Yes. Mhm. And, you know, there've been a few men who have realized, oh, well, they'd like maybe to be with me, but there isn't room. All right, so to ponder, what is your usual personality? Right? How much like your individuality is it? How might you bring them closer? Well, we've already been told how to bring them closer. Choose the guidance, the spiritual guidance, the small voice. Choose principle rather than what the senses, the sense mind, the brain, the default network would normally choose. Right? So every time I choose the principle of love, or I choose the principle of abundance, or I choose the principle of individuality as our norm, you know, namaste as our norm, every time I choose the principle, I am unwiring the default network in the direction of more and more of the spirit mind being how the body is responding to the world. Okay, number 2, welcome aboard, Karen. Number 2, consider someone you have feared or felt anxiety or anger around. What is their true nature? Can you imagine their individuality? Now, when I say individuality, I am saying their unique pattern in the one. All right, like the facet on a diamond, it's unique. Like, you know, the snowflake in the snow mound. Right. All right. What is, yeah, so what would they be like if their personality was more in line with their individuality? And that's where your imagination is useful. You can play back historical events if their individuality had emerged here, and you can play forward, imagine forward possibilities in which the individuality is what is being expressed and experienced. Yeah. And then, you know, the Mother Teresa in number 3, what would it take to serve the individuality of someone without getting distracted by the personality? Okay. And then there's the Peace Pilgrim. Does everyone know the story of the Peace Pilgrim? Yes? No. All right. So this is a woman who had been studying meditation and spiritual principles for some time. She was living in the LA area. And the still small voice told her the time had come to practice these principles. So she sold everything she had, gave everything away. She had nothing. She stood at the edge of the Hollywood Bowl, right there outside the gate in LA. And she was wearing a pair of shoes and socks, a pair of pants, 2 shirts, and an apron with pockets. And in one pocket was a tablet, and in another pocket was pencils. And I think that's all she had. And she's written, there is a book, an autobiography, and she started walking. And the idea was that she knew she was fully taken care of, and that as she was being present with others in this way, individuality, seeing only individuality, she would be totally safe and provided for. And she proceeded to walk. Now, in the biography, in the autobiography, she says that first night it was pretty cold and wet, and she was under an overpass, and she realized she had missed the mark. So she shifted, she reframed what it was she was telling herself and what it was that she really knew about things. Right. So that first night she got caught up in the appearance of things rather than in the truth of things. She ended up, I think, for 30 years, it was really close to 30 years, walking from place to place. Sometimes people would give her a ride. Sometimes people would even put her on a plane or a train. And she would stay in people's homes. She would stay in churches. She would stay wherever she was invited, wherever she was invited. And she would eat whatever she was offered, very Buddha-like, right? And she made a huge difference in people's lives. And after a while, celebrities began to pick up on her and invite her to come stay with them. And she'd be in these mansions and they'd have meals and she would talk about what was important and what she understood, and they would learn. And she was attempting to be peace. She was being peace and giving people that experience. So that's an example that you might explore. There's a couple documentaries out about that. And the practices are, pay attention to the personalities you encounter and how you respond to them. Right? And just be aware, oh my goodness, I got caught up in the personality. Rather than, oh yes, here is divine love expressing and experiencing more divine love with me.
I was doing that a lot with this kid that was staying with me because he was so negative.
Yeah.
And all of his conversation would be something about violence or something about war games or, fantasy stuff. And he was having really wild dreams and he wanted to share them. And I wanted to encourage the conversation, but finally I got to a point where I said, stop. What you're wanting to share with me is not in my world and I don't want it to come in.
Oh.
And I'm sorry, you're gonna have to find someone else to talk to. If that's what you want to talk about, we can talk about something else, but I'm not gonna listen to violence and mayhem and all of this dark stuff that you're into.
Right. And I have that with my son-in-law.
Yeah.
Right. We simply don't talk about what he spends 80% of his time doing. Ow. All right. Number 2, deny the possibility of any distressing or unpleasant personalities around you. Okay, so we use the denials, we use the negations, and we've already said that, been answering Rosemary's question. Realizing they are simply the outpicturing of old beliefs you once held, okay, and that are still kind of scattered around in your brain. So they are not beliefs that you are choosing to hold anymore, but there's remnants of them, and you're seeing those remnants in these other people, so you can just negate the beliefs that you're seeing in these people. And then the third practice, of course, is to focus on the individuality. And the last part of that, and affirm all the ways that good is becoming manifest in and for all the people around you. So to get back to how things shifted very suddenly, there was a realization that the good could happen where there had become an acceptance that it couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So questions about lesson 7. We're all good? I love it. All right, so like I said, that was a new thing that Katie brought into the world that I hadn't yet seen, and I really appreciate it. So spiritual understanding. Understanding. What is standing under what I'm thinking, doing, saying, feeling, and experiencing? That's what we're talking about. And she says, understanding, the spiritual understanding is a spiritual birth. It's the revelation of God within the human heart. So when I have this understanding, what I have is an alignment with this revelation that has happened in me, right? And she talks about Jesus with having asked his disciples a question that they answered confusedly based on their perceptions. He asked another question. The question was, who am I? And everyone is going, someone says you're Elijah, someone says you're Moses, someone says you're da 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 da. And then Peter, Cephas, the rock, the dense one, says, you're the Messiah. There's no question, you're the Messiah. And that's when he says, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed it to you, but God, the essence, the source that is in heaven has spoken, and you've listened. So whenever you have the question, who am I? Or who is this person in front of you? I remember when my babies were being born, I went, oh my goodness, if I really practice what I preach, these babies are the Messiah, each one of them. And it's my job to prevent myself from ruining them. All right. So now she's going on to the difference between a mental perception and a spiritual understanding. All right. So the second paragraph, you may have a mental perception. You may easily grasp the statement, all right, of all of those things. You may even go further and intellectually see that God is not only the giver, but the gift, right, that's within us. But then she says, unless truth, capital T, is revealed to you by my Father who is in heaven, it's no use to you or anyone else. So this is the difference between speaking from that knowing heart and speaking intellectual prowess, right? It's the whole difference. I have the intellectual understanding, but until it is in my heart and I feel the oneness and I feel the love and I feel the light, it's useless.
I was in a group for a while that we would, at random, a topic would be chosen and we would just talk about it. And invariably, I would be approaching it from how it made me feel, or the feeling behind what we were talking about. And almost all the others in the room were strictly intellectual about it. And I fortunately, I got to see the humor in that.
Well, good. Good. You know, when people have strong minds, yeah, it's fun to play in the mentality, right? And it's easy to downgrade the power of that heart knowing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hear you.
I was the only one in the room that wasn't a PhD.
Oh, that makes it easier for them to do that.
Yeah.
Oh my. All right. So the quote there is actually from the Psalms, or Proverbs. I'm sorry, it's from Proverbs. It's a mix of multiple Proverbs. But I love that wisdom is feminine in Proverbs, in a book that is almost entirely in the masculine form. And she is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone who retains her. So with all that you get understanding, or wisdom is another word for that. So the last paragraph on that, not until down in the depths of your being you feel your oneness with spirit, your source, not until you know within yourself that the fountain of all joy, wisdom, and health is within your own being, ready to leap out the instant you need it, will you have spiritual understanding. And it's that sense of it's within me, it is one, and I am just allowing what already is to be my experience. It's already here, it's already fully present, and I am getting out of the way. My personality is receding so that my individuality may increase. Yes. All right. So there's a section there as we move down about Jesus' teachings. And he's basically, she's saying all his teachings are designed to do this. So if you ever have any comfort in exploring the gospel teachings, I'm not talking about the letters here. Some of the letters are right on and some of them aren't. The epistles, by all those apostles. Epistles by the apostles. I'd always enjoyed that one.
Vessel with a vessel.
Something like that, yeah. All right. And then there's this paragraph, the second paragraph there, in his last speech prior to ascending. Now, he went through the resurrection, then he hung around for a while, and he realized that they were not going to ever go off on their own as long as he was around and they could rely on him. And so, as the story goes, he went up to the top of a hill with all of them present and was gradually lifted and dissolved into the light. Okay, but before that, he's told them the comforter that would be in them, not with them, in them, and which would teach them all things, give them power over every form of sin, sickness, sorrow, and death itself, revealing the deep things of God and show them the future. So anyone who, as he said, abides in me and follows my teachings, this is true. Okay. And the me abiding in that nature, that consciousness of the one, the oneness. Then all these things are possible. Now, in a couple of the epistles by Paul, and I think they're only by Paul, he defines these as the gifts of the Spirit, the ability to, heal, to preach, to teach, to discern spirits, and to, as in the book of Acts, speak in tongues. That means you speak and they hear in their own language. It's not you're going some weird thing with your tongue. And they hear and nobody understands it except maybe one or two people, right? All right. So he was telling they would find the kingdom of heaven within themselves, and he told them that over and over and over again. And that last sentence in that paragraph, feeling the comforter coming to their hearts and lives is the experience of spiritual understanding. Yes. The power that this awareness of the indwelling spirit gives is as much ours today as it was for the people then. So all the lessons, the point of realization, all the lessons in this course so far have been stepping stones leading up to the point where you may realize, that is, make real in your experience, the ever-present inner working of the Most High Source of all. Right? No one can reveal God to you. You cannot reveal God to anyone else. We may tell others how to seek and find if we've learned how, but the birthing is going to happen on their own. They got to go through that on their own. Then she says in the next page, the hundreds of people paragraph. Hundreds of people have tried this method and have not received what they earnestly, but ignorantly, sought. They have not received because they didn't know how to take, to allow freely what God freely offers. Others have failed because they were looking for power. And that's, yeah. So if I am simply being a vessel for this power to move through me, and it isn't about me, I'm more likely to experience that which I'm calling for. But if I am saying I want to be the powerful presence on the planet that everyone recognizes has this power, then probably not going to happen, right? Or if I am saying, well, in several times in the New Testament, Jesus will do a healing and people will say, well, that was for the glory of God. He was doing the healing so that people would be able to see the power and glory of the divine presence in their lives now, rather than the power of Jesus Christ, right? That's what he was trying to help people to understand. So if we are seeking anything in our ongoing spiritual journey, whether it's healing or abundance or anything, it's to make something happen that isn't about us. That's how it comes about. Does that make sense? So the whole thing with the insulation was to make something happen. It wasn't about me, although the story looks like it's about me. I'm just using it as a teaching story. It was about making this space a more healing, comfortable space that I'm actually probably going to be passing on to someone else. And I didn't want to pass on to them uninsulated, right? And the same with the other insulated space that I was talking about. So Peter calls this the gift of God, spiritual understanding, or the realization of the presence of God within us, okay? The realization, the making real in our experience. It's a really important distinction because we usually say, oh yeah, I realize that. I doubt it. If you say that, it isn't so, right? But if you make real in your experience the living presence of the divine power, you see and know and hear and taste divine presence. Right? So there's a quote from Emerson's Oversoul essay, and I remember one or two of you like Emerson's Oversoul. And it's a lovely one in there. This energy does not descend into individual life on any other condition than entire possession. So I can't just have the divine working over here and I'll play this way, this game over here. Right? It's a full thing. Now there will be times when I slip out of it, but to experience it at all, it has to be the whole, right? And that was another thing I had to learn because I was of the opinion that a lot of the things that I cared about were not in alignment with divinity. And so I was going, well, yeah, that stuff, I'll keep doing that stuff, but divinity can work when I'm over here, when I'm off doing something.
How well did that work for you?
It did. And that's part of why I ended up in the ministry, right? Because in academia, I couldn't talk about this stuff at that time. You can do it now, but I couldn't then. In the business world, in governments, my consulting business, I couldn't talk about this stuff. So I couldn't teach it. I couldn't work with it. I couldn't earn my living and so it was like, okay, it's either all or nothing, I guess, right? I have to be it, live it, speak it, teach it, preach it. Oh my goodness. All right. And that was the beginning of the moving into the ministry, was that realization. I can't do both. I have to do it all as one. And since then, I've done more consulting, but in the world that is comfortable with the fact that I am coming at it from a very different angle.
It's God or bust. Right?
Right, our truth self or not at all. Oh my. So yeah, and the other thing I had to unlearn was my belief that enjoying material life was contrary to my spiritual understanding. All right. Heaven tastes really good. Heaven is absolutely gorgeous. Heaven is filled with lovely music. You know, how would those things be counter to my divine nature? So that was beautiful when I figured that one out.
Did I hear you that, because it sounded like you were saying that the things you enjoyed in the material world were in conflict to,
That's what I've been taught.
oh, that's what you've been taught, okay.
Right. I had to unlearn
You
that.
had to okay, got it. I missed the unlearned
Right.
word.
Yeah. No, when I got that heaven is a place where all these things are fabulous, I went, well, if all these things are fabulous, then heaven on earth, well, go for the fabulous, right? If it really tastes good, if it really smells good, if it really is beautiful, it's part of my spiritual life. And if you look at the buildings that spiritual people were building and decorating, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 500 years ago. They surrounded themselves with beauty and they had good food. They didn't have excess, but it was good. It was healthy.
I don't
it
know
tasted
why I'm
good.
thinking of this, but I'm thinking of the movie Two Mules for Sister Sarah.
Oh, boy.
And there's always special dispensation.
Right.
When you want to enjoy something.
Right. If you haven't seen it, it is a trip. It is a trip. That was a Sally Field list. No.
No, it was Shirley
Oh,
MacLaine
Shirley
and
MacLaine, that's right.
Clint Eastwood.
Right, Clint Eastwood, I knew, right, but it was Shirley MacLaine. It's very cool. She's in a nun's outfit out in the middle of nowhere, and he's offering to help this nun, and it's really hard for him. And so she keeps,
But there,
Yeah.
but she could take a drink of whiskey, but that's fine under certain circumstances. There's special dispensation.
right on. Mhm. And then at the end, we find out who she really is. All right, now we get this idea of partial revelation and full revelation. All right. And this is where I was going a few minutes ago. We want the partial revelation, but we don't want that over there because we thought that wasn't okay. And if they've learned how to receive the desired gift, uncompromising affirmation, they will get the full realization. Now, one of the things that Emma talks about is, she says, the exact quote is, even liars can be effective healers, right? And people who have no understanding of divinity can be very prosperous because they don't have a block in their understanding, in their faith about healing or about prosperity. Their faith is going to work regardless of whether they have the spiritual revelation, the spiritual understanding or not. It's, according to thy faith, be it unto you, right? So that was another very important thing for me to get, that yes, some people will experience only this, but this leads them to the full experience. This leads them to the realization of the totality of the one. It's a step in the direction, right? So the last paragraph before the blue lines, every human being wishes, whether they know it or not, for this new birth into a higher life. Yeah, because that's who we are. We all want to be who we really are. That is our fulfillment, to go back to the course. That is our satisfaction. That is our salvation. That birth into the higher life based on spiritual understanding. So that gets us to the Solomon thing. Is everyone clear where we are so far? Is this all making sense? Good. I'm delighted. All right. So when David's son by Bathsheba, Solomon, came into his kingship after David passed away, David had been one who went almost every day to the tabernacle to be in the presence of Jehovah, Yahweh, to feel that connection and to get that guidance. Often, David would run off and do what his intellect told him to, and he became quite the sinner in the process. He did horrible things. But then he would go back to the tabernacle and he would do what he could to reestablish the relationship. He did experience the consequences of some of those horrible things.
Is this where the Saturday night confession on Sunday morning came into being?
Yeah, probably. David being the example. But when he passed on, one of the things that he had been told is, because he'd done all these sinful things, he would not be able to build the temple that he wanted to build. And so his son ended up being the one to build the temple. Well, his son, having seen these behaviors and having had, some of the most powerful prophets in Hebrew history around him while he was growing up, when he was anointed to be David's successor, said, heard, what shall I give you? And Solomon said, give your servant, and understanding heart. Now that's one translation. Another one is, and the wisdom to guide your people in your ways. Yeah, and that may actually be in the rest of that quote, but so, and his words pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said to him, because you have asked this thing and have asked not riches for yourself, nor have asked for the life of your enemies, but have asked for understanding to discern justice, behold, I've done according to your word. Lo, I've given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there has been none like you before you, nor shall any arise like you after you. And I've also given you what you have not asked for, riches and honor, so there shall not be any king like you in all your days. So that wise and understanding heart set up Jerusalem as the main point for the Silk Road to reach the Mediterranean. And they became the richest city in all of the region for several hundred years because of Solomon. And with that richness and with what David had set aside, Solomon's temple was built. Now, other things happened, but the next paragraph, so by letting go of desire for all worldly goods, all merely selfish ends, and desiring only the spiritual understanding, Solomon received all the other good things as well. And Jesus taught that as, seek first God's kingdom and righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Okay, so Jesus was building on the Hebrew people's understanding of Solomon's experience when he gave us that guidance in his teachings.
What's the time span between Solomon and Jesus?
1,000 years.
1,000.
Yeah. Solomon is known to be 1,000 at 1008 BC. Moses was either 1500 or 1250 BC, depending on who's talking. And Abraham was 2000 BC. Or 1600 BC, depending on who's talking. Because the Hittites, the Hebrews, were in Israel for 400 years. Yes, ma'am.
So just going back here where it says, because you have asked this thing and not for riches for yourself, by letting go of desire for worldly goods. I buy that, okay? Where I get tripped up is this kind of, and maybe this goes to law of attraction with what's her name again, Abraham. Visualize the Cadillac and yeah. So it's like that, to me, that's a worldly good. And so shouldn't I just meditate and just connect with that feeling of having everything I need? And maybe that, I don't want a Cadillac, but I'm just saying that shows up anyway. I mean, I get confused about, are we supposed to really put energy to that thing or not?
So are we in kindergarten or are we in graduate school?
Right, exactly.
Okay. Kindergarten, all I can imagine is the toys. In graduate school, I understand the philosophical underpinnings and the qualities that the toys stood for.
Right, okay, good.
So who is she speaking to at any given time? And you can see if she's with a group she's been where she's seen them for a number of times, she knows that most of them have been there quite a while, you'll get a very different
Yes,
teaching.
that's right. Yep. Oh, okay. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, it is, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. Solomon was pretty advanced. That's kind of why I told that whole story. So you could see he was already pretty advanced, right? Whereas someone else who didn't have any of that training and background and experience would have gone for, yes, give me this and this and this and this things. And instead of going for, give me the wisdom that I can do the job right.
Exactly. I love that. Okay.
Me too. I actually did an article for the Divine Science Journal on Seek Ye First, because it's what it is. When we go for the qualities of the divine, then the stuff shows up. All right. So by letting go of desire for the worldly goods and merely selfish ends, we get that divine understanding. We get that realization. So then she lays out the steps. And, you know, when you first consciously desire spiritual understanding, you'll probably not attain it at once. Okay. Now, some people do, all right, because some people have done so much previous to this life preparation that the moment they get the concept, bingo, they're there. But that is really quite rare. I think Yazoo Javadev, you know, Satguru is one of those. It just hit him one day in contemplation on the hillside, and his life was totally turned around. All right, so we begin our journey, third paragraph there, like Jesus taught his followers. We begin our journey by lopping off the branches of selfishness. We try to love instead of hate. We begin to forgive instead of avenging ourselves, even when it takes great effort. We begin to deny envy, jealousy, anger. So it's that paragraph. Yeah. So that example is taken again from the New Testament, where he sees a fig tree that isn't bearing fruit and he lops off the branches. Now it will bear fruit. Right? So we all have something like that going on in our life, something we've been attached to in the way of material stuff. And, you know, at the time that I was waking up to, oh, I can't have this part of my life be spiritual and this part of my life be, you know, material. It's all, you know, that was lopping off the branches of separation. So the beginning, we begin by speaking the words of truth that you have learned here. And that's speaking, writing works, speaking out loud works, having someone that you can share these ideas with works really well. And then second paragraph there, sometimes you'll be almost overcome by doubts and questions when you look for results that aren't there. I can't imagine any of us having that issue. All right. But you must work to pass this place of doubt. Literally, it's like when the Peace Pilgrim spent the night under the overpass, cold and wet, right? She realized this wasn't a sign, turn around, this is a bad idea. She realized she had thoughts and feelings that were contrary to what it was she was there to be and do. And it's part of the process to have those points where we do that, right? So like the Israelites wandering in the wilderness, you know, had the Israelites been trained as Moses anticipated, they could have been in the land of milk and honey on the 40th day, probably in 5 days. It's actually a 10-day walk from the southern part of the Sea of Reeds into what is now Israel. A 10-day walk, right? But they took 40 years to do it because two things had to happen. One, they had to lop off the branches, which meant in some cases people had to be dying. They had to leave their bodies because they weren't letting go of the old ideas, the old ways of doing things. And the new ones had to be strong enough to be able to do what was needed. So we had to grow a new generation in the new ideas. So each of us needs to grow a new generation in these new ideas inside us, right? And this is where reparenting can be helpful, you know, or redoing events in the past that no longer serve our memories well, and that sort of thing. But mostly she says, keep saying it, keep thinking it, keep looking for it, keep knowing that it must be so. That if I can even imagine the possibility of it, it must already be so. And the more I imagine the possibility of it, the sooner and more fully it becomes. So in part, what happened with the guy showing up and giving me this insulation and heat pump was because I'd been imagining the process of insulating, right? It was a reality in my mind that it was possible to insulate and how it might be. All right, then one day, the fullness of time, in the fullness of time, while you're repeating the words of truth, they'll suddenly become the living word within you. This is the power coming through the words. The words are no longer just words. They are means by which the power comes through. And in lesson 5 in Emma, this is what she's talking about, where the words are simply a means by which the power happens. And she's helped people get that idea by encouraging them to repeat the Lord's Prayer 15 times until they feel the power coming through in the Emma word. And so she's, Emily is just saying, speak them, keep speaking the words of truth.
That's why we repeat the chants that we dance to so many times in kirtan. You repeat those phrases so many times until you're not thinking about the words anymore.
That's right. You're right. And it doesn't matter if you know what they mean or not. The power comes through them. Yep. And then you'll no longer dwell in the darkness, for the light will be within your own heart. Now, it's not the light isn't there. It's that you'll be aware of it. You'll be aware of the light in your own heart. And the word will be made flesh to you. And you'll be aware of a new, more divine life in your body. And, I've shared a couple of times, early on in my healing process, and I've had the experience again more recently where it felt like I had run out of my energy, and then I was able to tap into the divine, and that energy carried me through. And that's what we're aiming, that's part of the experience we're talking about. But we don't have to run out of our personal energy. We can just shift into the divine energy and ideally be living from that all the time. That's the direction we're moving. Okay. And then she's saying you'll no longer run around looking for teachers or healers, including us. Okay, down to service. This is so powerful. This is one of the reasons when I say your daily practice involves silence, study, silence, sharing, and service. Study to remind yourself of what is true. Silence to internalize what you know to be true. Sharing so you verbalize what you know to be true. And service so you are acting from that place. So faithful service for others speeds up the process. Right? Many people are aware our inner hunger can't be satisfied with their worldly goods and earnestly seek the spiritual understanding. But while spiritual understanding is truly a gift of God, it comes to us more or less quickly as we use the light we already have. So we're sharing it verbally, and ideally we have people we can share it with, and then we are serving. We're letting that light which is in us be in service to others. And then she gives us another biblical quote. And then she reminds us that after the quote, too much of what people usually call spiritual seeking is really spiritual selfishness, and it doesn't contribute to their spiritual growth. So we've heard of workshop junkies, and we've heard of people who have learned, they're ready to learn the next method, and learn the next method, and learn the next method, rather than go within and find it, right? So that's a huge part of what she's talking about here. Too much going without food becomes starvation, damaging the body. And so a lot of people will go into fasting, prayer and fasting. And similarly, too much study or meditation overwhelms the mind. We spend all our time meditating, we're out of balance. And there is a reason the body has all these states of being. There is a balance in living beings. And even if you pay attention in the near-death experiences, there is variation in the experiences. It isn't all one experience. There isn't one state of being. There's variation and flow.
When Larry was getting up, at 3 or 4 in the morning and meditating until 8 or 9 in the morning, you advised him to be very, very careful of doing that.
Yep. Yep. Because it can be consuming and not healthy. Yep. An hour or so at 4 in the morning, absolutely. Yeah, but choosing to spend that many hours outside of the body depletes the body and tells the mind it doesn't want to be in the body.
Yeah.
All right. So then the next step is actually achieving the understanding. We grow by using for others the light and knowledge we have, right? We expand as we go on step by step in spiritual insight until we can indeed bear the many things that Jesus said most people couldn't, and so receive the real desire of our hearts. That is such an important phrase, real desire of our hearts. That is our fulfillment. That is our ultimate salvation from any sense of separation from the divine. And ultimately, the real desire of our hearts is to not feel separated from the divine, right? But with it comes that recognition that I'm not separated from any aspect of the divine. I'm not separated from faith. I'm not separated from health. I'm not separated from peace. I'm not separated from joy. All of that is here now, in me, through me, with me. And to the extent that I am willing to allow them to flow through me for others, I have created more and more space for it to be my personal experience. All right. So that gets us to the end of that lesson. So the pondering, the difference between spiritual understanding, intellectual understanding, I think we kind of touched on that a bit, but it's kind of fun to sit down and describe for yourself the difference, feel it. And number 2, what does it take to actually receive what Spirit is constantly offering? And that's another piece that we need to grasp, right? That it's constantly being offered to us. Whatever it is that our heart is longing for is constantly being offered to us. There's, that story that abundance preachers like to use of the man who died poor and, had been a good man, but he died poor and he got to heaven and he said, how come? I was so good. And and God said, let me show you something. And there were mansions, multiple mansions and rooms filled with this incredible stuff and just beauty and amazingly gorgeous wealth. And God said, all this has been waiting for you to claim it. If I think that I am separate from it, if I think that I have to ask for it, if I think that maybe someday I will receive it, I have not claimed it. Whatever it is. What does it take to actually receive what Spirit is constantly offering? And then think about it. Have you seen anyone do this? Are aware that they're receiving what is being offered? Have you had an experience in your life where you've received what's constantly being offered? Sandra shared a couple of weeks ago that I think it was just last week that you could claim, you would walk into the office and claim a specific experience that day, and you did it, right? And that was good at that time. And now you're moving on to new levels. And so you're discovering whatever inner process needs to shift for the new levels. And then the number 3, oh, we've all been here. Consider a time when you were so full of doubt and fear you didn't think you could go on. Yeah. Not unfamiliar to most of us. So what got you through that time? And can you remember the power of Spirit at work? Can you imagine how it might always be working for you that way? that always the right person is right there when we are awake to it. How whatever it is, the right book, the right person, the right song. What was it? I was listening to Zach Bush, one of my favorite current speakers. He's a medical doctor who used to live in Hawaii. I think he may still, who was doing incredible research on what COVID really was, and then got pulled off of social media because he was saying those things. But now he is saying that what is happening, he's a contrarian in the positive direction. Let me just say that. So I love listening to him. And he said one day he was in the car and he was just doing that idle thing. This was way back before all of this was beginning to come together for him. He was doing that idle thing we sometimes do. I wonder what my life purpose is. Now, Carolyn Mace does this great number because she says, you're vacuuming, you're driving, you have this thought, and all of a sudden your guardian angel jumps up and says, I've been waiting for this moment. And puts this in front of you and that in front of you and shows you this and shows you that. And you have the option to pay attention. Well, Zach's experience was the radio came on with the Eagles song about love. What does love mean? What does it mean to be loved, right? What does love mean? I've just lost the song. I can usually sing it, but it's that song where it was, yeah, it goes on. I really want to know it. Yeah, what does love mean? I really want to, yeah, that one. So that came on the radio right after.
Foreigner, not the Eagles. Right?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay, that's probably why you couldn't remember it. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Sorry.
Is it the song that goes, what about love? Da, 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 da. That one?
No, it
No.
actually. Da, da, da,
Yes.
da,
Sandra, yes.
It's a plaintive song, not a triumphant
Who
song.
would- who-
Want to know what love is? That's Foreigner. So
I
yeah.
want to know what love is.
That's
That one?
right. That's what came on literally like seconds after he asked himself that question. He said, I got it. So and he embodies it. He is just beautiful. He's beautiful to listen to. His ideas of what's actually happening in the world today are inspiring. They're marvelous. So Zach Bush. All right. Then number 4, Emma Hopkins says the power is not in the words. We talked about that. Repeating them till we begin to feel the power behind them. And can you remember a time this has happened? And Linda talked about the chants in the dance that help you do that. All right. Now the practice, we still have those couple of other things, focus on the indwelling spirit and spend some time in the stillness. Number 3, serve others, giving from the abundant time, energy, and resources that spirit provides. Most of us are accustomed to thinking we lack, but if my heart's desire is to know I'm not separated from my good, then I have to act like I'm not separated from my good. And one of the things that I said in a group just the other day is the moment I start feeling like I'm lacking in something, I start giving things away.
Yep.
Just start giving things
And I'll
away.
tell you another one to be careful of is if there's something you don't want to do, don't use lack of finance for the reason.
Right on. So Miss Manners says in her book on the guide to excruciatingly correct behavior, when someone is asking you to do something that you in no way want to do, you simply say, no, that's just not possible.
Yep.
That's it. All right. And then number 4, feel the loving presence while you understand the omnipotent principle that is the source of our being, knowing that it is expressing in each person and that it is working for the good of the whole as well as the individual. All right. So whatever good is unfolding in my life is good for the whole. Whatever is good is unfolding in the larger picture is good for me. Yes. As we can know that, we can begin to feel the loving presence. And I originally needed to feel like arms embracing me to know that I was being loved and feel that presence. And it was wonderful when I did. I literally would lean back and just allow those arms to embrace me and hold me. And it was wonderful. Ah. All right, so that brings us to the end of these 2 lessons. We will not be meeting next week because it's the day before Thanksgiving, and I'm under the assumption that some of us will either be traveling or cooking. I won't be doing either this week. Well, I'll be distributing around town news on Wednesday afternoon. So lessons 8 and 9. Next time 9 and 10. We did 7 and 8 today. Next time will be the week after Thanksgiving. And that'll be the last Wednesday in November. Oh my goodness, isn't that marvelous?
Well, I'm going to share something from the practice, the to ponder,
Yeah.
on the lesson we just finished, 8-8. Number 2, what does it take to actually receive what Spirit is constantly offering? Have you ever seen anyone do this? Have you, or can you imagine doing it? And this is what I did after Larry passed away, is that I promised him and I promised myself that I would say yes to every opportunity that presented itself for 1 year after he passed. And it's how I ended up experiencing a Sufi soul work journey retreat at Brighton Bush Camp. A couple other retreats I went to, an ecstatic dance retreat. Getting up on open mic. And a bunch of other things, but I said yes to every opportunity that came along. And that's what this reminded me of, because everything was there,
Constantly being offered.
constantly being offered. And it had been offered before in other years,
Absolutely.
but I had never just blanketly said yes, knowing that it, because I had made this promise, I'm saying yes.
That's beautiful. I had a friend for a while, guy I worked with, and he would say, if you're ever feeling sad, lonely, or depressed, just say yes for 3 weeks to everything. Yeah. All right.
I
Are
just
we
want to
done?
ask Sandra what kind of a dog she has. I'm such a big dog person, and I just keep seeing this little sweetheart in and out of her frame. What kind of a dog does she have?
You're
Can't hear-
muted.
I didn't hear
Sorry.
you.
I have 3 Cavalier King Charles Spaniels and 1 Poodle Shih Tzu terrorist.
And that must be the one. I had a Shih Tzu that died. So,
Yeah.
anyway, thank you. I love that. Really fills me with spirit as animals. So.
Are you? Have you been seeing me? I thought I wasn't off camera because I can't see myself. I've been kissing him,
kissing
him.
them and playing. I'm like, oh God, there's the spirit right there.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah. Okay. Here's another one. Doran's going to show you that one. That's Dee Dee.
What a
That's Doran.
Hi, Doran.
Thank you for lending her to us. And Callista has 2 dogs.
And I have a King Charles, Caribou. King Charles,
Cavapoo?
yeah, the Cavapoo. And
That's Sweetie Pie.
and then there's
Sweet Pea.
there's Mountain Bernays, a Bernedoodle.
A Bernedoodle.
Oh, I love those.
Quite the difference.
Right. Yes, but they seem to get along quite well.
Yes,
It's good.
another dog lover.
Thank you,
All
guys.
Cheers. I will
Thank
see
you,
you.
Ruth and Linda. Thank you. I love what you said, Linda. That's really going to help me a lot. Just say yes.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes, have a wonderful
Happy
time.
Thanksgiving. Yes.
Right, and we'll be on tomorrow for Thursdays. So
Happy
blessings all.
Thanksgiving. Sending love. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ruth, can I just ask you something very quickly at the end?
Karen.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you were able to join us. That was a nice surprise. I must stop the recording.
I said stop video.
I'll start video. Where's the recording thing? Stop share. We'll stop the share. And we'll find the recording thing.
Question is, I was doing things throughout the day, you know, like Joe Dispenza stuff, and I just woke up screaming my head off. Get it off of me. I don't want